I was just going to ask you about how, one of the, of course, from the larger ecosystem of advertisers, apart from your specific domain, has it really benefited, are people excited about post-digitization, or one found that the rating numbers had gone down for some of the channels, so has it, is the broadcast fraternity, is the software fraternity really happy, are advertisers really happy, and then of course your personal perspective?
Absolutely. Let me start with the personal perspective. Right. I mean, when I was actually looking at the topic, broadcast in the digital era, I thought in the digital era, broadcast is a misnomer. And what broadcast? Broadcast actually made sense in the old era when we used to live with scarcity, right? We had a pipe, an analog pipe that can take 80 channels, and it was all about scarcity. As a broadcaster, I would say, can I get my channel there as number 1, number 2, number 5? I'm ready to pay whatever. As an MSO, how much more money can I get because I have a limited pipe? As an advertiser, I have only limited channels, so I have to go after the same set of channels because those are the only channels that actually give me viewership. Everybody's mindset was about scarcity. Now, I mean, we are post-digital era, digitization era, right? We are talking about abundance. Suddenly you're going from 80 channels to, 800 channels. I mean, as a broadcaster, now, that pipe is no longer 80 channel pipe. That means that I can go back and renegotiate my carriage fees. I can actually, my fees are coming down. We have seen, 20 to 30% reduction in carriage fees, hopefully, going down further, right? As a operator, now suddenly, like, I used to negotiate with broadcasters saying that I won't give you slot in my pipe. Now I'm actually looking at, what additional content can I bring in? So the mindset is like a 360-degree change in terms of, what I was looking at and what I'm getting. As an advertiser, I would say, these are the only 10 channels that made sense because, they were in the number 1 to number 10 slot and they were the only ones that were being watched. As Sugata was saying, right, you're going to see a long tail of viewership. The viewership is getting fragmented further and further. That means that as an advisor, again, I look at abundance. I have more choices. I have more options that I can actually go at, and I can actually hopefully pay lesser, right? So from consumers to advertisers to broadcasters to operators, I think it's almost a 360-degree shift in terms of, moving from scarcity to abundance. And it's almost a scary thought. Suddenly when you have so much that you're like, the problem shifts, as you were saying, right? From distribution to discovery of content. Distribution is no longer a challenge. Earlier, distribution used to be the biggest challenge. Oh, how do I get my content, my ad in front of the consumers? Now suddenly, negotiations. So that means that I'm going to have, for the same budget, lot fewer spots available. So how am I going to optimize my spends? So suddenly, as I was saying, right, broadcast no longer becomes a good word, right? I would rather narrowcast. I would rather look at, what are the choices in front of me? What markets do I actually look at? I mean, every advertiser, recently I think Sashi had actually, from Lintas, he had actually given an interview as well as to, how every one of his advertisers are saying, I have to narrowcast. I have to, figure out ways and means of identifying who's my target audience and how closely target those audience only and minimize my spends. I think we have seen a substantial mindset change that is happening. And more than anything else, I think what digitization is actually helping is a fundamental shift in terms of mindsets across the entire spectrum because, this is something that they're not used to. This is a change that is tectonic, that is actually changing the parameters of the game. So everybody is re-looking at their budgets, the way they would actually look at, spends and saying, can I reconfigure my entire spending and thought process?
Right. I'm going to, ask you, Raman, in terms of post-digitization, since you are very closely linked with the ecosystem of the broadcast sector and the other allied sectors, have they been able to, are they looking at the way technology is moving ahead? Are there, specific measures that they're taking to look at, given the changes that have been brought about by digitization? Is there any more progress happening? That's one question apart from your perspectives on the issue we have in hand.
Yeah, so talking of the technology, view or the focus by the broadcasters, or not only them, even the entire ecosystem, there is a lot happening to say yes. Is it good enough? Perhaps no. So taking a leap jump from what Srini said, and very valid point, broadcast is really not a relevant term now, and you talked about narrowcast. We as IBM, we did a global survey on consumer insights, and we figured out that consumers today don't even want to get associated with demographic details. So their expectation perhaps is now unicast. So they are now today expecting, and especially on the smart devices, maybe not so much on the on the TV screens and on the other devices at home, but on the smart devices, they are expecting that the content should be tailor made for them. The what content, and the question of distribution to discovery, with very interesting statistics of 35,000 plus on a TV network. Now multiply the complexity with the content available on smart devices. Like for example, every phone, most of the smartphones have got Ditto TV, Box TV, Star Cricket, and multiple apps, loaded on them. How do you figure out that that XYZ person goes to a particular app and goes to a particular content and consume that content? So you got and this is an area where the broadcasters and the content creators, more than that, have to figure out ways and means of reaching out to the consumers directly. They have to create a connect. See, our industry, the whole media industry, strives on the money being spent by consumers. The whole pie of the industry is eventually being determined by how much is the consumer paying. Is the consumer paying 200 rupees ARPU on a cable, or is the consumer paying like a 250, 300 rupees in some of the satellite services? And then everything else is a distribution of money. Everything else is like who takes how much between LCOs or the MSOs or the broadcasters, etc., besides the ad revenue. Now if you have to multiply that pie, you got to first figure out that how do I extract more money from the consumer. So that whole shift of serving in a B2B environment to now, which is a completely consumer connected environment, and that to a consumer in a digital age, which is much more smarter than earlier times, who has many more options of consuming content. A consumer's life cycle of 24 hours, how much time would you really spend on consuming content of any kind or any form? And within that, how many options do you have? So I think the biggest challenge for the ecosystem today is to create that direct connect with the consumer, to know your consumers directly, and then start creating that start creating that relation which makes them spend more and more money. That is, in my view, in our view, that is what the industry really needs today, to speak so. And in the larger context of digitization, now, for example, cable guys have done, and as you very rightly said, Mr. Subramaniam, that they have gone ahead, put in the CD, the set-top boxes, everything is done. Cabs are done, more like a tick in the box. That I have a form, name, address filled up, and some by default packages being taken. Now, from a technology standpoint, the MSOs have to do a lot more. They have to, if they really want to become a true triple player or a quad player. Look at US market. When the whole market went digital, in the process of digitization, the market actually took a dip. It's not that when you go digital, your revenue start jumping up on day one. They actually experienced a few upside, and the market side going down. The cord cutting, cord shaving things started keeping up. Then they, when they become truly a triple play and a quad play player, then they started attracting back the consumers and growing all over again. I think that is a learning which people need to carry in Indian context, in the Indianized context also, that how do I, for example, now Hathway having launched a 50 Mbps broadband plan, phenomenal, DOCSIS 3 technology. Then very bullish of launching their broadband plans in next 3 to 6 months time. Now these guys are now getting the act right to launch it. But what is again needed more from their side is that, do I at least know my consumer? If Dan has got 5 million subscribers, do they know that out of 5 million subscribers, how many today will be willing to turn to their broadband connection? Number one. Number two, out of those 5 million, how many would love to pay me 200 rupees a month for a specialized lifestyle channel? Or how many of them would love to pay me for a education channel on a defined theme? So I think that consumer intelligence in the universe of consumers in which you operate is essential, and then you build your content partnership strategies accordingly. And then, as you said, distribution capacity is not a concern at all now. So I think this whole ecosystem has to work a lot more on consumer intelligence, knowing the consumer much better. A lot of analytics technologies need to play a role on that. And then you actually derive that knowledge and based out of the data and information into your decision of what kind of content. For like golf, when the golf was launched, I think 200 or 250 rupees, in a country where the ARPUs are 200 rupees to watch 200 channels, you pay 1 rupee a channel on an average. Somebody comes and says that I'm launching a 24-hour golf channel, give me 200 rupees for one channel. Now, it needs that vision, it needs that thinking. So you have to have a conviction that there is an audience, might be 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, who are willing to pay me 200 rupees. Likewise, you got to figure out which are those hundreds and thousands of small pockets of niche content or specialized content for which there are people outside in the market who are willing to pay 200 rupees or 300 rupees. I think that's what the industry really needs to increase the ultimate pie of industry. And once that gets done, I think most of the issues on digitization or associated areas will be put to rest automatically. Today people fight because the pie is small. So broadcasters will fight with the MSOs on their content agreements. The MSOs will fight with LCOs for their revenue sharing agreements. The whole industry is all running out of a short pie, and they'll keep on fighting about it. So I think we got to figure out ways and means to increase the overall pie and size of the industry.
Right. Thanks. Last but not the least, I'm going to ask Mr. Rajgopal, before we started this session, he had some very interesting views on how the health of the industry is given the whole changes that are happening in the sector. So, without much ado, could you tell us how the sector is doing? Is it really helped everybody, or is it still, or is it actually reeling under more problems than it was ever before?
Thank you. I think the panelists and everyone will agree that we are in a tsunami or a turbulence of change. See, even when the earlier analog pipe was there, critical challenges in recording what is real revenue. Ultimately, if you interact with many of the stakeholders in the media business, from the broadcaster to content creators to the infrastructure players, everyone will be saying that reinvest. See, what's happening today is that the change to the digitalization and the convergence happening so fast, there is a pressure or a continuous conflict between the content and the consumer. And I think we have already heard that consumers have choices, the content owners have choices, which means that significant investment has to go. The critical challenge for the industry today is to find the capital to create this incremental infrastructure across the spectrum from the content owners to the consumer. Even a consumer, if he wants to get a good content, I think he has to invest good money. Therefore, the kind of capital which is required for this sector is very significant. Having said that, the complexities which is arising out of the dynamic business model is manifold. I think if you have to attract capital, you need to express very clearly what it means to an investor or a capital provider. I think there is a lot more to be done. I think the information and data which is available, is it really meaningfully presented to the investor community? While the consumers are there, which is known, some of them are not declared. Today digitalization will be able to track the actual consumers, but the churn which is happening among the consumers, among the content providers, the managing the churn is going to be one of the big challenges, and consequently what it creates an impact on my capital investment and consequent recording in my finances, books, and to the financial stakeholders is the biggest challenge. I think there are no definite processes, there is no definite systems. It's continuously evolving, and there are many partners who are working along in this area. But see, broadly the way we have looked at it, some of the thing is that there is a significant investment which is required to provide the infrastructure. The second area is the burn cost. So far, because as Srini said, there was an era of scarcity, today the era of surplus. Therefore, consumers have choices, everyone has choices. Therefore, significant advertisement cost has to come, starting from marketing the channels themselves, marketing the content themselves. Therefore, the advertisement cost becomes a significant working capital in the whole chain of this media business, which was media itself was a medium of advertisement. Now today there is an advertisement cost which is coming into the media. The promotion cost becomes a significant financing cost. Where is the capital? Therefore, the search for capital is going to be a continuous challenge. Then the bundling of revenues. There is a significant bundling of revenues. Therefore, significant bundling of stakeholders. How do we stratify it? How do we record it? There is both a conflict of regulation and taxation challenges across the spectrum. Therefore, there is an increased focus required. The taxation starts from the end person up to the content creator. Therefore, there are areas of taxation which needs to be focused into, and convergence is happening from drawing rooms to bedrooms. Therefore, there are multiple consumers within a same home, because each one buys a content for a different purpose, because that's what we have seen. Because when you go into a Samsung S4, where one buys as a camera, another one buys for as a tape recorder, another buys for FM radio, another buys for voice, someone buys for data, the equipment is the same. And therefore, you will have a single medium of delivery. If consumers are different, content providers are different, the challenge is to find infrastructure investments and burn costs to manage this. And the solution to this is a stable reporting mechanism, an MIS management, and right way of articulation to the external world about the various business segments. And this is what our thought is, but it should not become a lose-lose game for everyone. At some point of time, you won't have enough dough to make the bread.
Have things, been, would things have been different had we not been affected by such a slowdown this year?
No, I think slowdown does not, see, three things work even in a slowdown. When you get depressed, you need entertainment, right? Okay, therefore three things don't
Now you
go.
have to pay for entertainment.
That's right, but still, at a consumer level, he doesn't go to a theater but sits in a home, still is cheaper than going to a multiplex, because the forms of media has changed. But whether the content creator, because there is a pressure on the content, is he being fairly compensated for his production cost? Because the solution is, because there is an inefficiency in the whole chain from the production to the consumption. Therefore, there is cross-subsidization which is happening, and what is really hurting is the unreported or revenue leakages in terms of the viewership. The theory that when we work on an Excel, we can say it's 1 million consumers. Somebody says that I have a record here that it will, digital will go to some 86 million DTH households by 2016. These are all statistics, but the kind of investments which needs to go into it, interesting financial models have to evolve, capital has to come. I think as the technology catches up to the consumer, I think financial models and capital has to consume. We were discussing on the buy side, a significant segment of revenues from the sector is unrecorded. From an organized sector, it will be 30% and 70% is in the unorganized sector. Therefore, the articulation of the revenue and employment potential of the sector to the stakeholders, which is the investing community and the financing community, is a critical challenge. Therefore, digitalization will help that process. Obviously, because you don't need multiplicity of bookkeepers, you don't need multiplicity today. Once the completion of digitalization happens, there is a possibility to track consumption. Whether you are able to recover or not is a different issue, but today you don't know the consumers, but at that point there will be numbers, there will be track, you will be able to reach a point where you will be able to make it whole sustainable and viable. But to reach that point, you need a continuous investment. That's my view.
Subramaniam, is investment really happening? Are we looking at, if you look at phase one itself, the various players who were there, are people investing, is there ongoing investment happening on improving infrastructure, and are there any steps being taken towards that?
I think when we look back the phase 1 and phase 2, or rather phase 1 alone, what happened was it was the national MSOs who